So thank you, devotees, for joining in our online reading sessions. So we are reading from the book The Mood and Mission of Srila Prabhupada. So we'll start our reading by chanting the prayers. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Namane Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Gauravani Pratyagami Nirvishya Chaitanya Kanchate Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karati Vachalam Mangalam Nayati Gurumit Kripatam Nande Shri Guru Nityanam Paramanam Guruve Gaura Chandraya Adhikaya Talaro Krishna Bhaktaya Bhaktaya Vabhisha Yasya Guru Lakshmi Yasyaste Hridaya Samritam Rasam Maham Bhajet Yonta Pravisya Mamajimam Prasuttam Sanjeevayati Akila Shakti Dharasvadhamna Anyam Chahasta Charana Shravana Todadin Pranam Namo Bhagavate Purushaya Vijay Guru Hariganya Krishna Chitto Vichildo Parivati Prabhu Bhajan Sukabdo Majin Sansa Vishwa Jayat Vikas. Okay, so we will start reading. Okay. Upgrading standards. When the first temple in Los Angeles was opened in 1969, only the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam was available. Srila Prabhupada's edition of Bhagavad Gita had not been published, and although devotees attended Srila Prabhupada's lectures, overall they were not very knowledgeable. They knew about a ceremony which they called bells, circling incense before Jagannath deities while ringing a bell. The morning program began at 7 a.m. and there were 3 evening programs each week. And when Srila Prabhupada gave the first few basic rules for deity worship, such as bathing and donning fresh clothes after going to the bathroom, the devotees thought them very hard to follow. But Srila Prabhupada said, "This is not everything. If I told you everything, you would faint." Srila Prabhupada gradually introduced more of the temple activities as time went by, and he saw that the devotees were able to do it. He did not begin to teach Srimad Bhagavatam when he first came to America. He initially prepared newcomers by teaching from Bhagavad Gita and only later taught Srimad Bhagavatam with the understanding that unless we have presented the groundwork, it is not possible. As soon as Srila Prabhupada's followers became even the slightest bit advanced, he brought them to a standard of worshipping Radha Krishna in the temple. Then he introduced the disciples to dressing, feeding, bathing, and putting to rest their lordships Radha and Krishna. He gradually introduced higher and higher standards of deity worship in each of his ISKCON centers. Specifically, he spent the first 7 months of 1970 in Los Angeles, teaching and establishing standards for the daily temple schedule. During this period, early rising for Mangalarati and other essential elements of the morning program were introduced. Sadhana, Kirtan, Vaishnava dress, and behavior, managerial procedures, and other aspects of devotional life with the aim of systematizing all these thought throughout the movement. To this end, in May 1970, he wrote to each of his 26 temple presidents throughout North America, Europe, and Australia, inviting them to visit him at Los Angeles. The idea was to build in Los Angeles a definitive model which could be standardized and replicated at every ISKCON center. Now I am concentrating my energy in this Los Angeles center as an ideal for all other centers in respect to deity worship, arati, kirtan, and other necessary paraphernalia. As I curtailed my moving program, I wish that you may come here at your convenience and stay here for a few days and see personally how things are going on. And by meeting with me personally for necessary instruction, I hope simultaneously in all centers, the activities will be of the same standard. Tamal Krishna Goswami recalled In Los Angeles, for the first time, the devotees were taking responsibility for organizing and preaching Krishna consciousness on a large scale, and the results were very hopeful. Sankirtan, book distribution, Sunday festivals, and daily worship all became standardized. Prabhupada was encouraged that this same success could gradually spread to other cities where he had temples. The process was ongoing. In 1969, Srila Prabhupada gently urged disciples to rise early. Regarding the time when the devotees arise in the morning, here in New Vrindavan, they are getting up at by 4 a.m. But in your country, the people are not accustomed to do this. And it will take a little time to get them used to it. But try to get them up at 4 a.m. as far as possible. By 1972, he had become stringent. All the presidents of our centers should see that all the members are strictly observing the Brahminical standards, such as rising early, cleansing at least twice daily, reading profusely, attending arati like that. Immediately begin this process. Everyone should join the Mangalarti. Gradually, we should become more regulated and strict for following the rules and regulations. Otherwise, we shall fall down. And in 1975, he bluntly warned, if you do not follow the rules and regulations, you will go to hell. Okay. Okay, Paramatmananda Prabhu, can you please read?
Pranam Rudhi.
Yes, Pranam. Yes, Prabhu, start.
Initiation standards. An important feature of Srila Prabhupada's gradualism is his early liberality and later
Liberality.
liberality and
Liberality.
liber-
Liberality.
liberality and later caution in giving initiation. When Umapati Das was initiated in New York in 1966, he had very long hair and a beard and was wearing a regular t-shirt and shorts he had made from an old pair of Levi's New York style at the time. Reference to
Um,
2830.
we are skipping the reference and inverted commas. Just read, Prabhu, no problem.
Okay. And in San Francisco in 1967, Srila Prabhupada would grant initiation to persons with only this slightest qualification. One night in the temple during the question and answer session, a big bearded fellow raised his hand and asked Prabhupada, "Can I become initiated?" The brash public request annoyed some of Prabhupada's followers, but Prabhupada was serene. "Yes," he replied, "but first you must answer two questions. Who is Krishna?" The boy thought for a moment and said, "Krishna is God." "Yes," Prabhupada replied, "and who are you?" Again the boy thought for a few moments and then replied, "I am the servant of God." Very good, Prabhupada said. "Yes, you can be initiated tomorrow." Reference 2834. Gurudas remembered that at the time of his initiation there was no bowing down or shaven heads. It was just a lot of fun. Certain disciples at that time told Srila Prabhupada, "Some of these people come only for their initiation. We have never seen them before and we never see them again." Some got initiated without knowing precisely what they had agreed to practice, and notwithstanding the rule that he had given in New York that initiated devotees should not eat foodstuff cooked by non-devotees. In the early days, initiated devotees used to frequent a donut shop around the corner from the temple in San Francisco, and they were also known to step outside the temple to smoke cigarettes. Before long, however, Srila Prabhupada became insistent that disciples actually adhere to their vows and have a better understanding of what they were going to do. In late 1967, he stated, "From now on, no more cheap initiations. They have to know something." And in 1968 he wrote, "I am not going to initiate anybody who has not attended our classes at least for 3 months and is not recommended by the leading members of the society. If you want to be initiated, first of all be fixed up in your mind that you will follow the restrictive rules and regulations." And in 1970, we shall be very careful now in the selection of candidates for initiation, and everything must be followed by them very strictly as we have instructed. Then we shall see about initiation. Gurudas further recalled, "We were starting to get more serious at a certain point, and so we wanted other people to be serious. We didn't like people just doing it as a fluke and then possibly leaving." Yet, seeing that still in 1974 unfit persons were being brought for initiation, Srila Prabhupada became increasingly strong in telling his disciples to stop this practice. This system now should stop. That somebody is coming for 3 days. Prabhupada initiate him. Why? First of all, see whether he is fit for becoming a disciple, then recommend. Otherwise, don't recommend, because the cheap recommendation is creating havoc. One not fit for becoming a disciple, he is accepting discipleship and going away after 3 days. This should not be allowed. Warning from 1974. In promising before the deity and before the spiritual master, one cannot later break the rules without being punished. Just as in the law code one is held for perjury. You must follow these rules and regulations if you are serious. Then take initiation. Don't make fuss. Also in 1974, Srila Prabhupada felt that a devotee who does not chant 16 rounds a day is not even a human being. He is a rascal. Devastatingly, he explained why disobedient disciples are not on the level of humans. In the court, they take promises in the name of God, in the name of the Bible, so that means he will speak the truth. Similarly, before the fire, before the deity, before the guru, before devotees, he is promising something, and if he does not follow, then he is a cat and a dog. He cannot advance. That is not possible. Previous page. That is the distinction between cats and dogs and human beings. Cats and dogs cannot, next page, cannot promise. It is not possible, but a human being can promise, and if he keeps his promise, then he is a human being. Otherwise, cat and dog, word of honor. The cats and dogs have no sense of honor. Either you kick him or pet. He does not know what the difference is. That is cat and dog. A human being knows what is a promise, a word of honor. By 1975, Srila Prabhupada's position was, I accept very select disciples, not that anyone and everyone comes and I accept. His earlier lenience about shaving and cutting hair was gone. Anyone who is keeping long hairs is no more my disciple. This is the first condition. More from 1975. Why were you initiated if you did not understand the seriousness? Why do you take initiation? That means cheating. Shift from public chanting to book distribution, especially during 1968 and 1969, public chanting, accompanied by distribution of Back to Godhead magazines for small donations, was the main outreach program for Srila Prabhupada's disciples. During this period, in reference to public chanting, Srila Prabhupada next often stated, quote, Sankirtan is our life and soul, unquote. During 1969, Srila Prabhupada instructed, in this age, chanting of Hare Krishna mantra is the prime business of the devotee, and preaching of this Hare Krishna mantra by outdoor Sankirtana and propagation of literature is our more important business. Side by side, deity worship is recommended, but when there is a question of accepting one of them, we shall prefer to accept chanting of Hare Krishna mantra first. Shortly, Shortly thereafter, ISKCON underwent a major transition, the emphasis changing to distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books, especially what devotees called big books, volumes of several hundred pages typically sold for several dollars and of Back to Godhead in far greater quantities than previously. Teaching of Lord Chaitanya was first published in 1969, followed before long by The Nectar of Devotion and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Volume 1. Notwithstanding Srila Prabhupada's pushing his disciples to distribute them, it was not until 1971 that devotees discovered how to do so. Stalked by Srila Prabhupada's eager encouragement, the distribution rapidly increased, and within about 2 years, with Srila Prabhupada's direct and un- unem- unambiguous approval, book distribution had eclipsed public chanting as ISKCON's main outreach program. This focus on book distribution fueled the expansion of ISKCON in several ways. Many new
Unambiguous. That is unambiguous.
no, yes.
Okay.
Many new recruits joined after reading his books, and with the profuse income generated, devotees were able to purchase prestigious city properties and farmland, and to develop temple projects in India. This shift in emphasis profoundly influenced the devotees' activities and ISKCON's whole tenor, and not all devotees were fully happy about it. But Srila Prabhupada was fully behind it. Satsarup. Our movement has changed in America in the past 6 years or so. Now, next page. Devotees are not much seen on the street chanting. So there are different feelings. Some say it is all right because everyone is now distributing book more. Srila Prabhupada, that is also nice. Satsarup, that's also a kind of kirtana, but then the public hardly ever see us anymore. They used to say, oh, the saffron-robed people chanting on the streets. Srila Prabhupada, but they come to the love feast. Satsarup, yes. Srila Prabhupada, that's all right. Satsarup, yes, it's not necessary to emphasize that street chanting. Srila Prabhupada, no. Sell books and invite them to come to the temple for the love feast, gender roles and interactions.
Okay, Prabhu.
It,
Hare Krishna.
thank
I'll tell
you.
somebody to read. Okay, Shyamkund Prabhu. श्यामकुंड प्रभु.
Yes, Prabhu.
ओ प्रभु
Gender
जरा
roles
जोर
and
से बोलिए, थोड़ा जोर
yes,
सुनाई नहीं
Prabhu.
दे रहा. यस प्रभु.
हाँ, बोलता हूँ जोर से. Gender roles and interactions. Introducing constraints on the interaction between the sexes was another significant area in which Srila Prabhupada only gradually implemented standards for the progressive advancement of his disciples. This became necessary when he found that the cultural standards in the West were far below what he had envisioned. When I came to America, my plan was to make sannyasis. But when I saw that association with women was such a free thing, my plan was let them get married, have one child. The wife goes to Vrindavan with the child, and the husband takes sannyas. In the first books he brought to America, Srila Prabhupada repeatedly and matter of factly referred to women as less intelligent. Although this stance is in accord with Shastra and the tradition he represented, Srila Prabhupada soon discovered that in Europe and America, boys and girls mingle unrestrictedly and have equal rights. Therefore, it is not possible to completely separate the men from the women. Being cautious in checking his early disciples from the looseness they took as normal, he made little distinction between the young men and women in those days and trained each to become preachers of Krishna consciousness. Resultantly, devotees had no idea of separation of men and women. Before long, however, Srila Prabhupada started emphasizing more restraint in dealings between the sexes. For instance, by stating that women should be addressed as mother. By 1970, his American disciples had imbibed the traditional gender roles that he taught to the extent that a newspaper reported Radhika Devi Dasi as saying, the husband is spiritual master. I am a woman, and the female body is at a lower spiritual consciousness. So the husband serves Krishna, and the wife serves Krishna by serving her husband. In return, he gives her spiritual knowledge. From a 1971 report, in the Krishna movement, the husband's role is to provide, and the wife's role is to follow and serve her husband. No questions asked. From a 1975 report, socializing between single male and female adherents is forbidden in the temple. As a female scholar noted in 1976, ideally the woman must be completely submissive and a constant servant to her husband. In more detail, from Dr. Silston Judah, the position of women in society may not appeal to Americans interested in women's liberation. Swami Bhaktivedanta says that all women other than one's wife are to be considered as one's mother, and yet he regards them as prone to degradation, of little intelligence, and untrustworthy. They should not be given as much freedom as men, but should be treated like children. They should be protected all during their lives by their fathers when young, later by their husbands, and in their old age by their sons. This view is largely consonant with the traditional one found in the ancient Indian law books. Females may not become presidents of any temple, nor occupy positions of authority. They may do the cooking, help with the devotional activities, and maintenance of the temple, and prepare flower offerings for Krishna. Regardless of their social positions, the souls of female devotees are to be considered of equal value with their male counterparts. Incarnations as male or female depends on one's karma. Their status has apparently not bothered the female devotees. One of them said, well, spiritually, we have an equal position. We are subordinate now in Kali Yuga, but it does not mean we are inferior necessarily. I can see that women tend to flip out a lot more than men. They are more emotional. Women's lib tries to gloss over all the very obvious differences, and it's nonsense. On the whole, we are less intelligent. Our attention is not so good. So we take our orders from the men, and it's nice. They are very nice. It's no problem. You are protected, and you are given instruction, and you don't have to make the decisions. It's really pleasant. The boys really have propensities for administration that we just don't have. So it must be my female body. But I am very pleased not to have to make very many decisions anymore. Although Srila Prabhupada, just 1 minute. Although Srila Prabhupada initially allowed unmarried women to live in ISKCON centers, he made it clear that this was a concession for the appalling social conditions in the West. In India, there is no brahmacharini, but here in your country, the boys and girls mix very freely. But just to restrict such free mixing, we think that the unmarried girls should remain separately. That is a contemplation. Actually, in the Vedic system, there is no brahmacharini system. Still, Srila Prabhupada expressed his preference that the grown-up brahmacharinis get married because, as he regularly taught, according to Vedic culture, a woman is never to remain independent. Eventually, he adjudged woman brahmacharani is artificial. As soon as they will find an opportunity, they will become vyabhicharani, dissolute. Apropos girls' education. In the early 1960s, Srila Prabhupada wrote, there is no harm in co-education in the schools and colleges. Later, he took a completely different track regarding the daughters of his disciples. We shall teach the girls two things: how to become chaste and faithful to their husband, and how to cook nicely. Only these two qualifications are required. Then her life is successful. Ordinary education is sufficient. A, B, C, D. This is all nonsense. Big, sound education, and later become a prostitute. In 1976, to prevent the spawning of illicit relationships and resultant serious offenses in deity worship, he stated, men and women should not worship together unless they are husband and wife. That system should be introduced. The husband and wife together can go to worship the deity. If they are not married, they should not go. Tamal Krishna Goswami explained that in the beginning, Srila Prabhupada did not make so much distinction between male and female disciples, even encouraging women to lead kirtans, give public lectures, and so on. But that later he became stricter. Gradually, as the movement became more established, he tried to establish what you may call Vedic culture, and that is where he started to make these distinctions. He did these things to protect the sannyas ashram and in general uphold Vedic etiquette. In Srila Prabhupada's own words, because in your country there is no distinction between boys and girls or men and women, they can freely mix without any restriction. I did not give too much stricture on this point because by such stricture they might be annoyed, and whatever Krishna consciousness they are trying to develop might have been checked. Notably, Srila Prabhupada used the past tense in this 1968 letter, which suggests that even so early, he considered such lenience and exigency to help to get the movement going. It was a necessary time, place, and circumstance adjustment. A brahmachari is strictly prohibited to see even one young woman. But what can be done? In the Western countries, the boys and girls mix very freely. If I say, my dear boy, you cannot see even a young girl, then my business there is finished. Therefore, I have to arrange according to the country, according to the circumstances, as far as possible. Gradually, they are coming to the perfectional stage. So we have to adopt Desh Kal Patra according to time, according to, but we are keeping our principles as it is, but making arrangement according to the circumstances. That Srila Prabhupada intrinsically disapproved of such free mixing is clear from the following. In our society, the girls and boys mix, intermingle together, and this is practically impossible to stop because you Western people are accustomed to the habit. Sometimes my godbrothers criticize me for intermingling of girls and boys, but there is no way out of it. You girls and boys will mix, even if I say no to. They cannot avoid it. To address this problem, Srila Prabhupada soon started promoting marriage between his disciples. There is no fault of these hippie boys and girls. They have not been trained. From the very beginning of their life, they are allowed to mix freely and they are allowed to enjoy sex unrestricted. Therefore, although it is not the business of a sannyasi to take part in marriage ceremony in this country, just to save my students, both boys and girls, from sinful activities, I am personally taking interest that they may become a good gentleman and lady by marriage. The so-called institution of free love marriage is ruining the human society. It is therefore our duty to establish the correct procedure of human life in the matter of encouraging our disciples who wish to marry to enter into a contract of spiritual wedlock. I have introduced this marriage system in the Western countries because there is a custom of freely intermingling male and female. Therefore, marriage is required just to engage the boys and girls in devotional service. Connectly, from the beginning of his movement, Srila Prabhupada wanted to introduce Vedic culture and its accompanying mindset. As an example, at the first marriage he conducted in 1966, he incorporated practices standard in Hindu weddings, such as having the bride wear an opulent red sari and tying her sari to the groom's cloth, saying that it should stay tied for 7 days. Not only did he get devotee couples married, he also introduced them in the Vedic understanding and practices associated with marriage.
Instructed them, not introduced. He also
Oh,
instructed them.
sorry. He also instructed them in the Vedic understanding and practices associated with marriage. In terms of Shastric guidelines, as followed in India for eons, and he presumed that the couples would remain united simply on the basis of their shared allegiance to Krishna consciousness. Satsvarup Das Goswami, writing from personal experience, observed Prabhupada was fairly simple about his marriage arrangements. He did not interfere in budding relationships, nor force people to marry if they were not attracted to one another. He thought that since both partners were devotees, they did not need to consult astrologers to draw up compatibility charts. Krishna consciousness would become the basis of their compatibility. The arrangements were made quickly and were based on the girl's attractions. Of course, Prabhupada considered that the men were devotees. He was optimistic, hopeful that these marriages would become lifetime commitments. Initially, Srila Prabhupada was satisfied with the outcome because in this country, mostly I see the boys and girls are not married. I have introduced this marriage system in our society, and the result is very good. He wrote to a god brother in India, Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, sent his disciples for preaching work, mostly as brahmacharis and sannyasis. But I have adopted the method of sending married couples for such preaching work, and you will be pleased to know that this system in these countries has proved more effective. But seeing several of these unions going awry, Srila Prabhupada became more cautious. This marriage business is not a farce. It must be taken very seriously. There is no question of divorce. And if he will promise not to separate from his wife, then my sanction for the marriage is there. Otherwise, not. Recently, too many couples have been drifting into Maya's waters, and it is very discouraging. Eventually, becoming disgusted with the inability of many of his disciples to live faithfully and peacefully as husband and wife, to become good gentlemen and lady by marriage. Srila Prabhupada largely withdrew from marriage related matters and instead promoted brahmacharya and sannyas. They are not happy. These Western men and women, they become married, but they are not happy. Therefore, I recommend brahmacharya and sannyas life. I have allowed my disciples to marry as a concession for having household life, because you American boys and girls are accustomed to mix freely with one another. But brahmachari life or celibate is better. I am so much disgusted by this troublesome business of marriage because nearly every day I receive some complaint from husband or wife. So henceforward, I am not sanctioning any more marriages. I made a concession. But how can I encourage something which has proven to be so much trouble? Henceforward, anyone proposing to marry must produce some outside income and live outside the temple. They must know this in advance and be prepared to carry such a burden. Let them be married, but at their own risk. I cannot sanction anymore. My Guru Maharaj never allowed. But when I came to your country, it was a special circumstance. So I gave a concession. But I am not so much inclined anymore. So I shall not sanction. But they may marry on their own risk of knowing that such arrangement is always troublesome. Still, so many of his disciples, mostly Westerners, fail to adhere to the vow, no illicit sex. That he concluded, sex disturbance is the permanent disease of the Western people. And seeing that boys and girls in countries like Europe and America mix very freely, Srila Prabhupada noted that one cannot suddenly change a community's social customs, although clearly his plan was to do so by wide-scale establishment of Varnashram Dharma. Knowing that all Vedic cultural usages could not immediately be introduced in the West, Srila Prabhupada nevertheless expressed a desire to do so and foresaw that it could be possible, as can be deduced from the words at the present moment when he was talking about arranged marriages. Whatever our parents selected, we accepted. I did not like my wife, but gradually I was accustomed. I was obliged to like. That is the Indian system. You like or not like, you have to accept it. The psychology is that the girls, generally before attaining puberty, if she loves one boy, she cannot forget him. That is her psychology. And a boy also, when he is grown up, the first girl he chooses, he also cannot forget. Therefore, by some way or other, they are mixed up. In your country, the situation is different. The boys and girls are freely mixing. And from school, college, there is free sex without any restriction. So we cannot enforce, at least at the present moment. Some boy and some girl agree. Then I bless him. That's all. Stress on Varnashram Dharma.
Bro, I'll, somebody else can read. Thank you.
Yes. Hare Krishna.
Aditya, Bhakta Aditya
Hare
ji.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dhanavad Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dandavad Pranam, please.
Stress on Varnashram Dharma. As may be inferred from the above, a major factor in Srila Prabhupada's adjustment of strategy was his changing expectations. Especially in the early days of his movement, Srila Prabhupada had great hope for his disciples, as is apparent in, for instance, expecting the marriages he arranged to work, expecting disciples' children to become consummate preachers, and his offering sannyasa to young men. Initially, he gave initiation quite liberally and spoke more freely about the realized stage of Krishna consciousness. But soon, in the face of multiple fall downs and failed marriages, he took a more cautious approach and started to emphasize the need of Varnashram Dharma. Although the establishment of Varnashram Dharma had always been one of Srila Prabhupada's main goals, from around 1974, he particularly started to promote it. Reference 2008-99.
So we are not reading the references and this one, bro. Just
Ah,
continue reading.
yes, Prabhu, yes, Prabhu. He wrote, my next program is to reinstate the Vedic divisions in society as recommended in the Bhagavad Gita. Again in 1976, when offered a large rural property near Hyderabad, Srila Prabhupada said, now we are going to embark on a new phase of the movement, Varnashrama Dharma. Previously, Srila Prabhupada had more or less routinely given Brahminical initiation to disciples within a year or so of their first initiation ceremony. Yet, in a purport dictated in late 1973, he noted that overall they had not come to the genuine Brahminical standard. He was hopeful that they could do so, but indicated that they would require further training and purification. In our Krishna Consciousness Society, some of the members are very anxious to introduce worship of the Saligrama Sila, but we have purposely refrained from introducing it because most of the members of the Krishna consciousness movement do not originally come from families of the Brahmana caste. After some time, when we find that they are actually situated strictly in the line of behavior, Saligrama Sila worship will be introduced. Thus, the Varnashrama Trust required more strictness in offering Brahmanical initiation. Now that we are more and more trying to implement the Varnashrama divisions of society, we should not think that everyone has to become a Brahmana. You must be very careful before you award the Brahmanical thread by recommending a man to me. Now that we are dividing our society into the four orders as much as possible, it is not that every man has to be made a Brahmana after a year. Especially if one cannot even get up early and go to Mangalarati, he cannot become a Brahmana. So consider carefully before you recommend further men to me. Phases of his activities. With expansion came change. One observer noted, as the decade of the 1960s came to a close, the Hare Krishnas strengthened their foothold in North America and extended their reach to Britain, France, and Germany as well. with temples in New York, San Francisco, Berkeley, Los Angeles, Boston, Montreal, Seattle, and an agricultural commune in West Virginia. ISKCON had achieved a wide geographic spread. It had also become an establishment in the American counterculture, with its saffron garbed devotees and its Hare Krishna mantra easily recognized by both the hippies and the commentators, who remarked on this colorful cultural new religious movement. During the 1970s, ISKCON would both continue to expand as well as institutionalize itself, with larger temples, a bureaucracy operated by the new converts, and an attempt to outreach to the straight community outside the counterculture. The ISKCON of 1976 was in many ways different from the ISKCON of 1966, and Srila Prabhupada had changed with it. The grandfatherly figure was now a commanding general, assertive, demanding, challenging, and loved for that by his troops. Of course, internally, Srila Prabhupada was always a simple, humble, surrendered Vaishnava, but he took various roles as required for the evolving situation. Several persons have perceived specific phases within this evolution. Some devotees have analyzed that during Srila Prabhupada's years with ISKCON 1966 to 1977, he passed through four stages. A first phase was when Srila Prabhupada was the only responsible preacher or devotee, and everyone turned to him as the sole spiritual guide with no intermediary. This was the way Srila Prabhupada appeared to the devotees in the first temples in New York and San Francisco. As Swamiji, he was lenient, always seemed to have time to talk with anyone, and only gradually requested his disciples to follow the rules and regulations. He was trying to get a movement started after a year in America, during which time no one had come forward. So, if disciples left him to clean his own apartment or shared his bathroom, he tolerated it. During this time, his dress was also distinct from later years in certain ways. He did not wear kurtas but a chadar over his bare chest, or he wore an inexpensive turtleneck jersey supplied by his followers. He rode with them on buses, subways, and trains, and he didn't travel very widely, but stayed in each center for months at a time. This changed during the period when the movement grew quickly. From 1969 all the way to 1975, Srila Prabhupada, by his own empowered endeavors, became the world leader of a major religion. It was a time of tremendous exertion for him. He revitalized India with Krishna conscious preaching, personally traveling widely there and managing the construction of major temples. He also regularly made worldwide tours. As he initiated hundreds and thousands of disciples, he was not quite as accessible to individual disciples as he had been in the early days. Now, by his arrangement, his leaders, especially the temple presidents, sannyasis, and his GBC, handled more of the administrative affairs, although the final decisions and the burden for everything always rested with him. The third phase was his gradual withdrawal from the more intense participation in management. In one sense, the second phase of his full participation in the expansion of ISKCON always continued. But it is true that Srila Prabhupada began to allow his GBC relatives to take over more and more. Just can you scroll back, bro? GBC
Representatives.
representative,
Representative.
representatives to take over more and more. At least that was his desire. He expressed that he wanted to spend more time writing. He began to stay longer in India, where he seemed to feel more at home, and on his yearly tours to America and the West. He didn't become much involved in the management of temples. Gradually, he assigned the responsibility for delivering public lectures to his older disciples, himself preaching more to the devotees and training them as he went quickly from temple to temple. Now he no longer had to be the pioneer of every new venture. His disciples ranged far and wide over the globe to open new places based on Srila Prabhupada's credibility and armed with his books. Then, in the last year, he clearly changed his mode of activity and stayed almost entirely in India as his bodily activities diminished. More and more, he moved into his very last departure pastime. He gathered a few disciples near him for intimate personal service and made arrangements for the continuation of the movement after his disappearance. Concordant with the above analysis, when Srila Prabhupada first arrived in London in September 1969, Shyamasundara Dasa, meeting him after gap of 1 year, perceived a different, more regal Prabhupada than we have seen before. Amid all this apparent change, Srila Prabhupada remained essentially the same. Govinda Dasi noted in her experiences with him from 1967 to 1977 a feeling of absolute stability, an absolute state of non change, which I found in him so many years ago and which continued to be. In the material world, everyone is always changing and being tossed this way and that by the waves of their destiny. People go through so many changes of ideas and values and thoughts and personality. And I would go into Srila Prabhupada's presence, and everything was the same. He would still smell like sandalwood and roses. He would still talk on Bhagavad Gita. His philosophy hadn't changed. Everything was stable. It was the same as it was before. And his habits, his putting on his tilaka, his saying his sacred mantra, everything was very solid. This wonderful feeling every time I would be in his presence, just like eternity, like a timeless state. Time didn't exist. అవును ఇచ్చేయండి. I would be in his presence just like eternity, like a timeless state. Time didn't exist in his room. All the pressures and problems of the world just didn't seem to have the same impact because he was so above it all. He was so transcendental to it all.
Okay, Prabhu.
Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. A practical Acharya. Having come to this world to deliver the fallen souls back to Godhead. A practical Acharya. Having come to this world to deliver the fallen souls back to Godhead, Srila Prabhupada's vision was on the spiritual sky, yet necessarily also cognizant of ground realities, simultaneously transcendental and practical. His preaching against material existence was accompanied by exceptional proficiency at operating within it. He spoke 4 languages: Bengali, Hindi, English, and Sanskrit. Was knowledgeable in diverse fields such as business, law, agriculture, cooking, and both British and Indian history, and kept abreast of the most salient aspects of current affairs. Dr. Thomas Hopkins perceived Srila Prabhupada's this worldliness as a major factor in his success. Bhaktivedanta Swami's success as a religious leader of the institutional kind, as distinct from a religious leader removed from any institutional context, lies largely in his ability to engage people in religious activities of a practical nature, or conversely, practical activities with a religious purpose. This is one of the strengths of the whole bhakti tradition. It has tended not to become outwardly, in the sense in which the term is very often taken, utter indifference to the world and to action within the world, reclusiveness, inactivity. And the Bhagavad Gita is really one of the great theoretical and practical statements on how to resolve the conflict between spirituality and materiality. The Hindu tradition, in general, has managed to combine the religious and other worldly concern for salvation and release from the world with the need to perform worldly action. The Gita is one of the great solutions. What Bhaktivedanta Swami did was to take that theoretical solution and apply it practically within a religious institution in a way that most other movements or traditions have not tried to do or have not been able to do. To help people discover what their own nature is, what their own psychological proclivities are, what their natural abilities are, and then to put them to work in some kind of practical way and to show them how to perform those activities with devotion to God. This is what the devotional tradition is all about. Bhaktivedanta Swami never tried to construe the teachings of Gita to encourage some kind of other worldly religiosity. His teachings were always in practical terms. One can worship Krishna by starting a magazine. One can worship Krishna by producing devotional art, or by cleaning the temple, or by cooking a feast for public distribution, or by repairing the temple car. It is activity performed as devotional service to Krishna that is practical essence of the devotional tradition. Okay, exactly 7:15, 8:15. So we will stop here and we will, this is quite a big, it will take at least 10 minutes. So we will meet tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you very much. Unless and until if you have any questions to ask. Okay. We will meet tomorrow. Until then, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhibhyo vacha bhaditanam pavanabhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj ki jai. The Moody Mission of Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.